Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to another edition of the Pest Geek podcast. I am Frank Hernandez, your Pest Geek, here discussing all things pest. We want to remind our audience to join in on the revolution. That's right, join in on the conversation, be part of the society. Pest Geek Podcast Listeners Group on Facebook. And we're on YouTube. We're on the web, pestgeekpodcast.com. Check out there the notes, everything that we put into the podcast. They're all on there. And now for today's topic.
Help! I can't find any good workers. We're going to be discussing in a series of podcasts that I'm going to be doing on the realities of hiring in the 21st century. The realities of hiring in 2019 and beyond. What we're dealing with, what I'm personally dealing with. This is a challenge for me. So if you are a solo operator, if you are a business owner, I got people listening to us from across all kinds of platforms, in many types of field work, looking at pest control. And I think we need to make pest control sexy again, so we have to look at what the reality is. And there seems to be a disconnect between the reality and the grass on the other side, from both parts, from the employee side and from the ownership side. And those of you who have ever listened to me understand that I am pretty fair and equitable. I try to look at both sides. I look at my situation. I have empathy. I try to put myself in the other person's shoes. And as a public speaker, as a person who's done counseling, I have to put myself in the other person and try to understand the other person's point of view. I'll give you an example. I just had to fire one of my employees 2 weeks ago. And, we're looking now for a new replacement for that. And, we did nothing wrong in this situation. We supported that person, made sure they had everything they needed, gave them all the encouragement we could give them, was there for them, did whatever we had to do. The person chose that they were going to violate company policies, not show up to work, clock in, and not work, and not be where they were supposed to be at the time they were supposed to be at those places. And this went on probably a little bit longer than I would like to admit, but when we got wind of it, I immediately started digging in, building a case. It took me about a week to build my case. And then I brought them in on a Thursday and basically terminated them. However, the reality of what I have to go through to find another person is painful. The reality of what I had to do as an employer was painful. It was painful because I have a conscience, and my conscience, sometimes to my detriment, controls me on what I have to do. And regardless of whether this person was completely wrong, they were stealing, they were completely wrong in the process, I still have empathy for people, and I had to put myself in for 2 days. I had to prepare myself emotionally and mentally for this, because I was livid at first that how can the person do this? I was in disbelief. It's kind of like you go through this process of, I cannot believe this. I'm in disbelief. Second, after being in disbelief, I was enraged. Then after I was enraged, I was worried. And then after I was worried, I was just depressed about it because I had to terminate somebody who at the end of the day has to go home, is a father, has to take care of his children. But even though this wasn't on me, it still weighed heavily on me. And being an employer is going to weigh heavy on you if you've never done it. And I've done it for a while. I mean, this is probably tech number 9 in 12 years. Okay, and we're growing now at a pace where it's becoming very difficult, and we're going to be discussing why it's so difficult to grow and why, the majority of people in the pest control industry are solo operators. 50% probably are solo one-man, two-man shows. Wife at home and maybe a second help, and that's it. That's as far as they want to get because of the nightmare of having to hire, and it's harder today than it was 10 years ago. Extremely hard. I think the percentage of hardness is probably 100% harder than it was 10 years ago. And the reason is we have an employee market. It's no longer an employer's market. And I had to do all this, prepare for this. Literally the night before, I could not sleep. It really weighs heavily on me to make these decisions. And so that's just why I say from the beginning is you got to hire really slow. Do not be in a hurry to put somebody in a truck that you vet. And the problem that you got to understand is that the majority of people that are going to steal from you have no criminal record. Complete background check. You can't verify this in an interview. This is the challenge you have about people stealing from you. You can't verify it in an interview. You can't get it from previous employers because they're never going to divulge that because they're afraid of getting sued. The only thing you can confirm these days when you're hiring somebody is the date they started, the date they finished. You might be able to get starting salary and ending salary, and whether they're recommended for rehire or not, and you might not even get that. Most of the time, employers, especially seasoned employers, who have HR departments and who work for companies, if they work for a larger company, it's even harder to verify. You got to do it in writing. And you're only going to get start date, ending date, position held, and that's it. That's all you're going to get in a back. I mean, when you check references, what you're really checking for, if that person is really employed there or not. Are they lying to you that they were employed? Did they make up their position? What did they do? I mean, you're getting intel, and you're putting a puzzle together. And the way I look at hiring is you got to get all the pieces. There's 5 steps to hiring, which I'm going to discuss in a future podcast. But in this podcast, I want to discuss the heartache of why it's so hard to hire these days, and what do you got to look at? First of all, employment is the lowest it's been. Unemployment is the lowest it's been in 50 years. You got to understand that's an employee market. What does that mean? That means that it's simple supply and demand everywhere. No matter what business you're in, everything is supply and demand. The less of a supply there is of qualified people, the higher the price is going to be on the product that you're going to have to pay for that product because it's not available. It makes it much harder to find, source out, get. And that's both good and bad. We're going to look at both the reality of where the marketplace is. We're going to be discussing the psychology of the marketplace. I think there's a big shift in psychology that we haven't had to deal with in 10 years. I've been hiring people probably for 20-something years now. Almost probably 20-something years that I've been hiring people. But my hiring experience was I had an HR department and I needed somebody, and they got me 3 qualified individuals for me to look at. And I basically had to choose the best one that I thought. So my experience is really in management and leading people, not recruiting. Hiring and recruiting are 2 different things. I had to hire and fire people, but I didn't have to recruit them. And now that as I'm a solo operator, recruiting is something that I had to learn to do. It's an art and a science. To give you an example of how hard recruiting is, most headhunters that do recruiting for a living make a really good salary at it. And then second, that their rate, what they charge to find you somebody, is somewhere between 10 and 20% of first year salary. So if you want to hire somebody to hire for you, you better think about you're going to be paying between $3,000 and $8,000 to $9,000 for them to do their job with a 50% retainer up front. That's the reality. If you don't believe me, go look for it. I've done a lot of work in the last 2 years of learning to recruit. I have over 2,000 applicants right now, I believe, that I've gone through resumes in the last 2 years. And I'm looking at the trend. See, I'm a guy that looks at data, and I look at the trend. As long as I know where the data is and where the trends are, and I know where the numbers are, I know where to play the game. The reality is that here's the mentality shift that has to happen in a solo operator or a small business person that doesn't do recruiting for a living, doesn't do hiring for a living. They make a lot of bad choices, but the reality is they refuse to look at the data. Everybody refuses to look at the data until they get hit in the face. I know what I'm going to do. I have an opinion. The opinion is based on what I feel. It is not based on most of the facts. It is mostly based on feeling. And this is why I post a lot of things. For those of you that listen to me, I've listened to me on this podcast for 5 years now. And watch what I post online, on my blog, on my personal Facebook page, on my Pest Geek page, the listeners group. And by the way, if you're listening to me, you need to sign up for the listeners group. There's a lot of things going on in there that we're going to be discussing that is only going to be for the listeners group. But you find that you got a really difficult time of placing me, of figuring me out, because what I talk on the podcast and how I write, it's almost like two different people. And the reason is I'm a terrible writer. Second of all, I'm a goat. I've decided that that's what I am in life. You know, people ask, what are you going to be in life when you grow up? I'm going to be a firefighter. I'm going to be a policeman. I'm going to be a doctor. I wanted to be a business owner. And then second of all, I figured out, you know, who are you? What do you do best? And what I do best is I'm a goat. Literally the translation of a prick. I prick people into action. And I provoke people into giving me the truth. And I've learned that a lot of the time you will not get the truth out of people unless you provoke them. So think of me as a provocateur of sorts. But in any case, where we're at in this employment market, and you got to look at two sides. You got to look at the employee side, look at the employer side. Most of the people that are doing the hiring and are doing hiring have a disconnect. What they've done is, and I can tell the difference when I'm talking in groups and when I'm posting something, I know immediately by the response whether this person has a clue of what they're talking about or not. And most of the time, they're either a solopreneur or they're a technician. And they have a mentality of what they think hiring should be like. In other words, always the response is you need to pay more. You need to pay more. You're not paying enough. How do you know what I'm paying? And how do you know what my market's like? And how do you know what my percentage of payroll is? You have no clue to make that comment. You're making that comment because that's what you've heard and that's what you believe. You're parroting. But the reality is that every market, every job, every position, every company has a limit on what they can pay for a position. And what happens is the moment you decide you're going to pay and you're going to hire, you find out that you think about what you're paying, but you're saying, I'm not going to pay more than what I'm making. And most of the time, you're going to have to be paying more than what you're making initially to get the right person. So what happens is there's a disconnect between what you know, what you think you know, what you expect to do, and what you're actually going to have to do once you're in that position. See, today there's too many posers online, posing as if they're real entrepreneurs, they're real business people, they're real consultants, they're real this, they're real that, when the reality is they're not doing it, they've never done it. They're giving their opinion on something they don't have the facts on, but they're parroting what they're hearing other people say, and based on their feeling of how they felt working for 3 or 4 companies, and their experience is limited based to them only. So their opinion is based upon their limited experience. I can expect you tell me this is what my experience has been. I can respect your experience. I have a hard time respecting your opinion as a professional opinion on what I should do and what anybody else should do based on your limited experience. So when I have these discussions, I can immediately find out by the response who they are, because I look them up immediately and I find out, who they are. Some of these guys that are giving me their advice have never actually run a company. They do their solo thing. Others that I look at, I said, man, the guy is on the top 100 of PCT. This guy absolutely knows what he's talking about. This is the guy I need to listen to, whether you agree with him or not. And where we're going is helping people grow. We want to help people grow. We want to help people get better. We will always want people to do better. I'm one of those guys, and the reason I'm investing my time is I'm sharing my journey of what I have already an experience in, what I've devoted several thousand hours to in the last 5 years of learning, that I'm still learning, talking to headhunters and recruiters and people that actually do this for a living, and what the actual experience, looking at the actual data that we've collected over 2 years now, 3 years of hiring, over 2,000 applicants, looking at all the resumes and looking at the experience of who's applying, looking at, profiles, psychological profiles, looking at experience profiles, profiling people, and gathering the data ourselves in our market. Now, this is limited to our market, but what I'm going to be sharing with you is pretty much a national phenomenon. Okay. And then you have the market. You got two extremes in the market. You either don't have enough people applying because there isn't enough people in your market to apply for that position because you're limited in how many population you have, to going to an exasperating end of the spectrum where it's unmanageable. And you have to develop a system to weed through it because it's unmanageable. And this is where we're at. We're in a major market. We have, in one county, we have almost 2 million people, 1.8 million people in one county. Okay. So we have an enormous amount to choose from, and it's overwhelming for me based on having to run a business, being on the road, having to do the admin work, being a manager, being a husband, a father, a podcaster, and then having a ministry. How do you find time to do this? I got to streamline everything. And you're saying, well, aren't you going to be shortcutting this and shortcutting that? I says, at one point, I have to get to the truth, and I have to make the best decisions with the data I have. Those are the risks. Those are what you have to do. You can't sit there and say, I'm going to spend the next year figuring out, because it takes you 3 to 6 months. The average national right now is 6 months to hire, and the person will quit. Usually 60% of those people will quit within the first 60 days because they find out this job isn't for them. You spend 6 months looking for somebody, going through the entire process of hiring, interviewing, and the person will quit within the first 60 days. That's the reality of what you got to look forward to. So I got this great study. 97% of America is employed, roughly. We talk about the unemployment rate in America, but we don't talk about the employment rate. We don't look at it from the positive. We look at it, tend to have a negative view on things. Okay, so 97% of people are employed. Okay? That is tremendous amount of competition compared to 10 years ago, 2009, where roughly 12% was on the books. About 24% of America was really unemployed or underemployed because they were working 2 part-time jobs because they got displaced. Well, then people were available. Everybody was available. You put out an ad and there was 10,000 applicants for you. Today, you put out an ad and you've got 1,000 unqualified applicants per every one that's actually qualified. And we're going to be discussing also in a series of podcasts that I'm going to be doing on the qualifications of a pest control technician and what you need to look for in the soft skills. All right. So now you've got 97% of America is employed. All right. Pretty much everyone that can work is working, and everybody that can't work and there's something seriously wrong with them, like illness, diseases, they just don't want to work. They're basically comfortable living on welfare, and they don't want to do better. That's really what you have in the situation. But this company called the Randstad Group did a study. And before you say, well, those numbers, they don't make any sense. You can make stats do anything. Yeah, guys, look, you can make stats do anything. But the reality is This is a $23.3 billion global provider of human resources. So before you sit there and think you know more than these people about doing surveys and figuring out where they need to hire until you've pulled out $3 million in revenue, I think you need to hold your criticism. Because, I mean, I get that. And look, guys, when you call me and you put that on my post and stuff like that, it just shows that you don't look at the real information. You're not in the game. Okay, you either need to be in the game or you need to just, really keep your opinions to yourself, because your opinion really doesn't matter to somebody who's growing. And the problem is that I found with a lot of the guys that aren't growing is they're hanging around the people that are keeping them down. And this is the reason I stopped going to a lot of these associations and networking and all this, because 90% of the guys I sit across the table from are all discouraged and saying, I can't find anybody. You're better off being a solopreneur. It's too much trouble. I did it before. I went back to being myself by myself, and they don't want to grow and they don't want to get anywhere. But if you want to grow, understand there is pain along the way, but stop associating with people that are telling you why they can't grow. I really don't care for your negative comments. I don't listen to them. I really don't care. It makes me laugh most of the time when I hear this. But I just want you to know that I'm being transparent with you and this audience and where I am and who I am. And everybody who knows, talks to me and understands you go online and you say something stupid on my platform, I'm going to really shut you down because I want and encourage people to challenge themselves to be better, not for people to sit there and be negative on why it is you can't do something. I mean, that's the easiest thing to find on God's green earth. But this is the $23.3 billion global provider. In America alone, they got 5,700 associates. And they place more than 100,000 people in jobs. Okay? So they know what they're talking about. Here is when they did a survey, they found out, we're going to be breaking this down a little bit, but almost half of people are considering leaving their job to freelance. Okay, I want you to think about the mentality of the workforce. Understand that perception is reality. What people think about is the reality, whether you agree with it personally or not, because you are a special kind of person in the world. But the reality is that half of people are considering living to freelance work, taking whatever their expertise is and just freelance at it for other people, because we are in a new era of entrepreneurship and solopreneurship in this country like any other time in history. And when 20 years ago, when you told your dad that your boyfriend was a freelancer and you guys were thinking of getting married, your dad would be like, he's a deadbeat, right? He's like, he's not going to provide for you ever, because freelancer is a code word where I can't keep a job. Today, freelancer is code word for going out and going after it. And people that are freelancing and doing stuff on the side to their regular job in their specialty is growing and is tremendous. And you got to understand that if you're hiring somebody, chances are they're already freelancing something or they're doing a side hustle. And the danger that you have with pest control is that they're going to start moonlighting. You got to know that. That is a reality. You can't escape that reality. Almost half of employees right now are considering leaving for better opportunity and better locations. In other words, places closer to where they live. The commuting is getting really bad. If you're in Miami in the morning, it takes you an hour to an hour and a half to get to work if you're driving more than 8 to 10 miles to work. You need to find a job close to home because you don't want to commute. Well, guess what? People don't want to drive. Guess what? 50% of this job is driving. Do you see a problem? A third are considering leaving to work remotely. They don't even want to work in the office anymore. There's no need today for a lot of the jobs that need to be done to be done in an office. In other words, if you are a receptionist and you're transferring calls, most calls are done today over voice over IP. You can literally do that from anywhere in the world. There's no need to have a person physically there answering a phone. There's no need to have a person physically there to do routing or scheduling or accounting or bookkeeping or any of the things that most of have to be done. So when you're hiring and you're telling people you're going to be coming here every day to work, understand that a third of people really want a job now that they can work from home. And I know a lot of people that are working from home, and we're looking for people to work from home as a company. Now, understand this. 8 out of 10 people expect raises every single year. And when they're not getting them, they're highly disappointed. If you can't figure out how you're going to give your people a raise every year, understand that in pest control, you got to be able to raise your prices every year. And a lot of you have no experience in doing that. You're afraid. We do it all the time, every single year now. And guess what? We've only lost one client per year on average, which is insignificant. The percentage we lose for raising prices because we have to cover our increased expenses to the client that doesn't understand and doesn't appreciate us is very small. Here is the thing. Almost 2/3 of people will not even consider working for you unless they're getting 2 weeks of paid vacation annually right from the get-go. This idea that you're going to get a week and then you're going to have to wait 2 to 3 years to get your vacation when you're already working at a job that you're getting 2 weeks vacation, you're not going to be able to hire anybody when you tell them you're not going to be able to take a vacation for 2 years because you're going to be running a route and I'm growing and I can't jump on a route for 2 weeks for you to work. Why would they leave their current position to come work for you? See, it isn't that you can't find good workers. Here's the problem, is that you can't attract good workers. The good workers are already employed. They're already doing something. And what you got to, most of the time, what you're asking them to make is a lateral move. 8 out of 10 will tell you that it's the money. The reality is that we're going to find out through this study that it's not the money. It's not the money. Most of the time, you can get somebody else to work for you if you can get them what they really want. See, this is the whole thing about hiring is you're putting out a job. You're putting out a job, and most of you are offering a dead-end job, especially when you start working for a solo operator. There are a lot of benefits. We're going to discuss the benefits of working for a solo operator, but you don't have a marketing mentality. You don't have a competitive employment mentality. You have is, I need to find somebody to get on the truck because I'm working 16, 18 hours a day. I'm pulling in $150,000 to $250,000 a year in revenue. I can't grow anymore. I can't handle it. I brought my wife home to start managing the office last year, or I'm thinking about bringing my wife to start so that I can get off of all that and I can focus on getting more business. And then you're going to get to the point where you just need somebody to jump in that truck that you can train. The problem that you have is you got an unrealistic expectation of what it's going to take to bring that person over. And the qualifications that you need for this job are high. The problem is you have set the bar so high because you want another you that you can't get that. And you're going to have to understand that you're going to have to create SOPs. You're going to have to create a training program. You're going to have to create, because people can't work with solopreneurs. And the reason is everything is in their head. They don't know what to expect. They don't know what they're supposed to know because a lot of you are terrible trainers. You're great technicians. But when it comes to training other people and transferring that knowledge, you're terrible at it. And there's one thing that I've been able to do for 2 decades now is train people. I'm not a coach. I'm not a guru. I'm not a business development guy, although I can do that. I'm a trainer. Fundamentally, I'm a trainer. I know how to train good people to do the work. That's what I know how to do, and I'm learning to hire. And I'm learning to do this the hard way. So you got to look at all that, all your limitations, and say, why would anyone come to work for me? You got to make a list of the reasons why somebody will come work for you and get out of your, I need somebody to come work for me. Because the reality is that nobody cares about you. They care about themselves. It's WIFM, what's in it for me, not what's in it for you. And when you have a mentality that says nobody wants to work and you're using that vocabulary, what you got to sit down in your own mind and saying is, no, there are people who are willing to work. They're just not willing to work for me. What do I need to do to get those people to want to come work for me? Am I a marketer or am I selling a dead-end job? Am I selling the position? Am I selling a career? Am I selling something that somebody could really use in their life to better their life, better their family's lives, better themselves? Or am I selling what I need right now because I'm being totally selfish and self-centered because this is all I can focus on? And unless you can switch the focus, you're not going to attract the right people. You're going to repel them because they can see right through you. And when an employee is asking you, what am I getting paid? How much time am I taking off? What are the hours that I have to work? Understand that that's the new culture. And a lot of you solopreneurs who are in your 40s and 50s don't understand that culture. You have your parents' culture. You are a Gen Xer. You have a different mentality than this new millennial generation. And you got to get in line. If you're going to attract them, you're going to have to develop a company that attracts them versus something that what you want. If it's always what you want, and this is the major problem that we have with small business employers, is the mentality is all about them. And why they're not attracting these people is because they don't have anything to offer them. It's more of the same, and they're tired of the same. And they don't want to go work for a small employer because there are no opportunities for growth. There's no opportunity, and you don't know how to lead, train, and manage people. You know how to be a good technician. And people want to feel led. They want to feel secure. They want to feel empowered. They want to feel, and it's all about the experience. Understand that we went from customer service to customer experience. And everybody talks about the customer experience. Well, what about the employment experience? And this is what you have to understand. So, unless you're going to offer 2 weeks vacation, forget about it. More than half feel their companies views profits over people. More than half have this feeling. And you had this feeling because that's why you quit most of the time. So why would you consider not having a mentality that profits over people? How do you bring that into your culture? Almost half don't currently have enough growth opportunities for them to stay any longer. This is a double-edged sword because the reality of the generation is they don't have the patience or the perseverance to think 4 to 5 years down the line. They're thinking here and now. You as a solo operator or a small business guy with 3 to 5 are not going to have them in a management position in the next year. They're going to be a technician for 2 to 3 to 4 or 5 years until your company grows enough that you can put them in a management position. The problem is they are unrealistic of the expectation. They want to get into a company now and move up within the next 6 months. And when the challenges or when their expectations haven't been met immediately, then they basically are going to the next experience. And it's no longer about going to college, graduating, taking a trip around the world, seeing the world, and then coming back and deciding what you want to do. This is about, I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do from the time I'm 18 to the time I'm 29, 30 years old, 35, and spend the next 10, 15 years trying to figure this out. Because college no longer is an option for a lot of people. It doesn't provide, unless you're going to be an engineer and you want to be an engineer, you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or have a specific graduate degree that is actually useful, besides having a degree in anthropology, which is going to be totally useless. I mean, if you get a degree today in entomology, it's going to be totally useless because you're going to end up working for a pest control company. Unless you're going to go work for a manufacturer and sell chemical. Or become a university, person. But those people have their careers defined. The problem is the majority of millennials don't have their careers defined. And what I'm looking at over 2,000 resumes is that the average 90 plus, I would say 95%, have had 4 to 5 jobs in the last 4 to 5 years. Most of them are lasting 6 to 9 months on their job. So they're applying for me, and I'm looking at this and I'm saying, you will never make it here because I have nothing to offer you that's going to satisfy you for the next 6 months. And I'm not growing at a pace where I'm going to make you a manager in the next year. Why am I even going to waste my time with you? You see, you can't bring them in. They're like, I want an opportunity, but I don't have the perseverance. I don't have the long-term vision. I don't know who I am yet. I don't know what I want to do. And I want to experiment. The problem with pest control is I can't have you experiment with us because it requires a certain amount of seriousness. There's a high level of responsibility. There's a high level of think about it, you're in a mobile chemical factory, putting these in people's homes, and you have to have a certain amount of empathy. And what we're looking for is a set of soft skills that will determine whether you have a chance of making it. We don't even know if you're going to make it. In reality, when we interview you, when I put you through my 5-step process for hiring, at the end of the day, I am taking the best educated decision I can make with all the evidence I have. But until I actually put you in the field and I actually test you and I actually have you working with me for several months, I have no clue whether you're going to make it or not. That's the reality. We do the best we can with the tools we have to hire people. 6 out of 10 have left or leaving because of the direct supervisor. And here's the problem. The majority of small business owners don't know how to manage and lead people. When I look outside of my city and I look at every job that's there, I said, how is that restaurant owner going to treat his people? How is that sub shop going to treat his people? How is that bicycle shop going to treat his people? How is the corner place, that the little market going to treat his people? How is that store that sells export going to treat his people? When you're working in an environment of 6 or less people, a lot of things come into play. Versus when you're working at a large corporation that you can switch positions or move up. It's direct supervisor. People don't quit their jobs. They quit their bosses. That has been the number one rule. Are you a boss that is going to provide leadership, or are you going to provide micromanagement? If you're going to micromanage them, you can only micromanage them until they learn their job. Then you have to let them go. And you have to trust that they're doing their job, and you have to verify that they're doing their job. And we have tools in place for that. 4 out of 10 have left or are leaving because their employers don't recruit or retrain high-performing individuals. Here's the reality from both sides. I'm going to give you a shocking revelation here for both employers and employees. The reality is there's the rule of 5. If you have 5 employees in your workplace and you hire them, you're going to have one that's a superstar. You're going to have 3 that are just okay. They do their job. They do it satisfactory. They're not standing out. They're not going over and above. They're just getting it done. They're doing it right. They're just getting it done. They're going to go home to their family. They're going to clock out, and they're going to enjoy their weekend, and they're not going to think about you or your company until Monday morning. And then there's that 5th one who is the underperformer. So you got A players, you got B players, and then you got C players. And when you have 4 or 5 employees, you're going to have C players. And the problem is you got to learn to get rid of those C players very quickly. And this is where companies will fail, is they won't get rid of the C players very quickly and replace them with at least B players. But you're going to find that are limited in B players because B players are going to demand a lot more of everything. When you're producing, when you're the top sales guy, when you're the top employee, you're going to be demanding. You see, you got to be prepared for a demanding employee. If he's going to overproduce for you, you're going to have to be prepared to overgive. And if you say everybody gets paid the same, everybody gets the same treatment, that's not the real world. That's a fallacy. You see, so when you're making bad choices all the time because you need to fill positions, you need to put hot, warm bodies into seats, your best people will start leaving because they say, I don't want to work for an organization that isn't bringing in top people. But that's the reality on both sides. Almost half want to leave their job due to a toxic work culture. Half of people feel that they're working in a toxic work culture. When you walk in every day as the boss and you don't set the pace and you're ranting and you're raving and you're going off the handle and you're moody and nobody knows how to talk to you, understand you're not going to bring in top people. You're screwed. You got to learn to be stable. You got to learn to be level-headed. You got to learn to handle pressure. And you cannot tolerate toxic people in your work environment. Culture is the name of the game. Culture is the name of the game. If you're not building the culture of your company and you don't have a culture in your company, understand that you have chaos. You either have a culture of what people are expecting, or you're just letting everyone do whatever it is they want. And a lot of solopreneurs have this problem. A lot of people who have 4 or 5 companies, member companies, have this problem because they're afraid to let people know that they're screwing up, because they're afraid to lose them because of how hard it is to replace people. So you just let them do whatever they want. And then you create a culture where people are saying, well, they get away with whatever they want. I'm going to get away with whatever I want. And now you have chaos. I make it very clear. We have SOPs, standard operating procedures, protocol, policy, procedures. If you don't break them, you start breaking them, I start breaking you. It's that simple. No ifs, ands, or buts. This is the way we do it. I listen to all my people. Nobody can say I don't listen to them. But at the end of the day, I spent the research that you don't have coming in with 1-2 years of experience and doing the work of creating SOPs so that the customer doesn't get hurt, that you don't get hurt, that everybody works and gets it done. When SOPs fail, that is the time. But you know, SOPs will work 99% of the time. I'm not going to start tanking everything for 1% that it doesn't work. And then when the guy starts nitpicking to me about the 1%, I set him straight right there. I said, you're a dumbass. Because the reality is it works 99% of the time. You have to manage the exception. So you can't throw that back on me. Okay? This is the thing that you have to look at. Over half want to quit because of the negative office politics. The culture is in a lot of places where you created a piranha pit yourself. You created a piranha pit by the way you compensate, the way you pay, the way you deal with your people, and everybody's out for themselves, and then everybody is at each other's throat. So the reason that people are leaving, half of America is looking to quit. You got to understand that if you've got 4 or 5 people all the time, half of your people are looking to jump ship right now. That's a reality. That's what you got to stomach. You got to come to that hard reality and say half of your people are looking to quit potentially. And what are you doing to mitigate that? To deal with it, to set it straight, to make it right? That C player, you're never going to be able to motivate him. You're never going to pay him enough. He's always going to be a slacker. Nothing you do with a C player is ever going to turn him around. I've learned that. You got to let him go. You should have never hired him in the first place. You could have figured out he was a C player. All right, so let's get on to the next thing. 2/3 of people would be more satisfied if the employer better utilized their skills and ability. Here's the problem in a small business. And I've experiencing this talking to small business owners, talking to people who are working for 4 or 5 member companies. The boss micromanages everything. He's involved in everything. He wants to do everything. He doesn't allow his people to grow. There are many ways to allow your people to grow. Utilizing their skills. Every time somebody comes to me with a bright idea, I consider it and I said, you know what? Give it a shot. See what happens. Or, yes, we can do that. We just can't do it right now. We're not in a position to do that right now. But, how can I better utilize your skills? And I look at what their skills and abilities are, what their strong points are. And I try to push them, literally push them. Sometimes to where they tell me, look, I can no longer handle this. And then I say, okay, but you understand I gave you a shot. You can't come back to me and telling me I didn't listen to you and I didn't give you a shot at this. You're not ready yet. What do we need to do to get you ready? Here's what we need to do. That's my job on a daily basis, is coaching, teaching, training, dealing with these issues. You understand that if you're going to be in the employment game and you're going to be in the growth game, that 80% of your job is going to turn to HR. They're going to be your problems. 80% of your problems in the company are going to be HR problems that you have to deal with on a regular basis. More than half need to leave their current employment position to take their career to the next level. Understand this. If you are not going to be passionate about growth, and you're going to say, I'm going to limit this to 2 to 3 employees, 5 employees, because I don't want to grow anymore, you're done. People want to work. A players want to work for A players. B players want to work for A players. C players will work for anybody. When you see a guy taking a job every 6 months to a year, he's a C player. He doesn't have what it takes right now to keep a job or stay in a position. He doesn't have the soft skills. He thinks he is actually more capable than he is. But the reality is the company doesn't see him as more capable, because I do profiling on all my people, and I know where their strong points are. I know where their weak points are. I start working on them on these things so I can develop them. 9 out of 10. Listen to this. 9 out of 10 would not continue to work for a company with a bad reputation. Public image, what people are saying about you in the public eye, is going to matter tremendously to this next generation. If you got a bad reputation, if you got 2 and 3 stars, a lot of people are not going to kind of want to come and work for you, because that's what they're looking on that line. Especially the A players are going to do the research. The C players will apply to anything. The B players are saying, well, this seems like a better position for me. This seems to be a better opportunity because it's more pay. I get less hours. I get this. I get that. They're moving for minor reasons, usually pay and working conditions. But if you've got a 9 out of 10, that's a high consideration that you need to consider. 65% roughly are going to leave their employer. 2/3 are going to leave their employer if they get caught in a, media negatively portrayed problem. You got to be real careful, because everybody now is looking at what's online. All right. More than half of employees feel pressure to stay on their job because they're the primary financial provider. In other words, this is known as the golden handcuffs. I can't leave my job because if I leave and it doesn't work out, so they're in a position where they don't want to be, but they have no choice. They're unhappy. Understand that an unhappy employee is not going to be a productive employee. You got to see how you're making your people happy. And you're saying, but that's not my job. I'm providing a paycheck from them. You got the wrong attitude. You've got the wrong mentality. You got to get intimately knowledgeable about your employees to a point where you understand what their needs are, what they want. And if you're no longer able to provide that, you're better off just being honest with them and saying, listen, I'm not going to be able to provide that right now. Look, I've told my people, I said, listen, we're looking at 5 to 6 years before you get promoted. 2 to 3 years before I can do something different with you. If you can't stay on long term, I can't hire you. And I look at people that have at least 4 to 5 years where they've been in a job. If they have not been in a job, they disqualified themselves automatically. When I get the resume, I have an automated process. It's very simple. I can't hire you if you've been in a job 6 months in the last 5 jobs. I can't risk that because I've got to do too much training, too many things that tells me in your personality that you're not going to stick around long, that you're not mature enough yet for this type of job. You might be 21, 22, 24, but if you've been living at home with mom and dad has paid for everything, and you went to school and you haven't decided anything yet because you don't have to, you don't have no pressure, then you have limited yourself. And I'm telling you this as an employer, that you're limiting yourself. You are cutting your own throat when it comes to job market because you're displaying that nobody can depend on you and nobody can trust you. And this is what I'm looking at. 7 out of 10 will stay in their current job because it's easier than starting something new. People want to jump ship. They're not happy. It's like being in a marriage that you're not happy in, you've never been happy in, you haven't been happy in 5 years, but you're in it because of the kids. At the end of the day, it isn't going to end well. Over half don't seek out to consider other jobs because they can't start with less paid time off. In other words, going back to the original issue of this study, of this, that you need to be paying 2 weeks vacation. Well, you can't do it. Most pest control operators can't give their people as a technician unless you've grown to 5 to 6 technicians, 7 technicians, and you have a floater. So you got to have these realistic things on paper. This is what I can do. This is what I can't do to that employee, instead of thinking, I'm not going to disclose any of this. I just don't want to deal with any of this. I don't want to tackle any of this because I'm right now needing somebody. And if I disclose all this, I'm not going to get people to work for me. You're going to lose them anyway. You're better off having a list of things saying, look, this is what I can offer you. This is what I can't. And you're not going to get this for 3, 4, 5 years, but you're going to get valuable experience. You're going to get this. If in a year from now, in 2 years from now, you can go off to work for a better company. This is not a conversation that most of you technicians and most of you solo operators are willing to have with people because you can't see yourself training somebody for a year and then having them quit. I would rather say, I understand you're going to be here for a year to 2 years. In that time frame, I'm going to invest this in you in order to get the most out of you that I can while you're here. And then and in the end, you'll decide whether you want to move on, you want to stay here. But I know that I got a training system, I got a hiring system, and I understand that that's the game. I know where the game is, where the rules are, and I got to decide whether I can play that game by those rules. How can I break the rules to do better? What can I offer people that they really want in order to create the atmosphere of the company? Because you got to create an atmosphere and a culture first. And the problem, you have no mission and no vision. And we're going to be discussing that in several podcasts. That if you don't have a mission and you don't have a vision of where you're going, how the heck do you plan to take people there? How do you plan to take your company there? You got to sell the vision. You got to sell the mission. People do not care so much about a lot of tangible things that you care about. It care about, where are we going? Where can I go? How can I grow? What can I make? And the money isn't really that important. The money to a lot of people that are applying is not that important because they're already making it what they have. They want the ability to do better as a person. personal growth is going to need to be more important than financial growth. Are they getting satisfaction out of their job? Are they in the right position? Are they in the right place? Are they feel utilized? Do they feel working for a company that really cares about them? Does the owner really care about his people? You see, am I able to have this work-life balance? Understand that as an owner, nobody's going to work as hard as you. I'm up at 4:30 to 6:30 every day, and I'm finishing work between 4:30 and 6:30. I'm putting in 12-hour days like it's nothing. But I'm used to that. To me, 12 hours is nothing. And then I'm cutting it off now earlier because I want to spend more time with my children. My children are growing up. My son is 5. My daughter's 9. I need to spend more time with my kids. I don't want my legacy to be he was married to the company. But I still have to put in 12 to 16 hours a day. I just do it around them. So I get to take them to school some days. I get to pick them up. I get to go to karate class. I get to go to horse riding class. I get to go to all the things that they're involved in school because I work it around my schedule. I think if you can create an environment where people can work a lot of things around, where they can work. My technician knows he doesn't have a set start time. If you have to take off early, you can't. And just come back and do your job and finish it. If you got to take time off, I work it out with him so I can give him time off. Man, I've worked, Frank, it's Thursday and I've already got 40 hours in. I've been doing this now for, especially in the summer. I need to take 2 or 3 days off, because I've been working, 55 hours a week in the sun. There's difference between working 55 hours a week in an office and working 55 hours a week in the field. It takes a toll on you. And I need to take 2 or 3 days off. And I'll go run a route for 2 days for my people so that they can take the time off. But I know they've been putting in the work. I know what they're cranking out. So when you're a producer and you're an A player and you need to take that time off because my father's sick and I need to take off. I get a call since my dad just got run to the hospital. It's bad. Take off. Just cancel all your appointments. I mean, everything that we do around our company is built around people, not around the client. We're a completely outdoor exterior company where we have only maybe 1 to 2 appointments a day, tops if we're lucky. Our callback rates are in the single digits in the summer. They're half digits in the winter. We've set up protocol policies and procedures. We've set up a company that allows us to grow with the way the market is going to be and create an environment based on what we see in the next decade of what is actually happening. You need to have that vision. You need to, if you're going to grow, you need to get out of this. I'm going to hire a person, a warm body. That is totally reactionary. There are times when, look, we still take I've got right now 5 to 7 people that we're vetting for a new position. It's been 2 weeks since we posted. So we've gotten hundreds of applications. We've got actually 7 interviews, and we've got now down to, we had 1 and he already got offered a job. We got another one that we're looking at and possibly a 3rd. So out of 100 applicants, 125, 130 applicants that we got right now for this one job, only 1 will really qualify. And only and then we're still looking at it. Is this the best option? Can we hold out and see if we can get something better? Because we're looking at everything. And at the end of the game, I put them through a 5-step process, which is what most recruiters put people through. And at the end of the day, 50% of those people that I hire will not make it. At the best, 50% will not make it past the year. That is the reality of where we are in this marketplace. We hope you have enjoyed this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. Until next time, have a pestacular day. Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.